Hi, and welcome back to our three-part training series, Secrets Unveiled. I'm Melanie Tucker, owner of Rare Finds Travel, and I hope that you're getting some good ideas from these videos that you can use with your own travel planning. So training number 1 was all about guides. Training 2 was all about special lodging. If you missed either of those, head on over to the Facebook page of Rare Finds Travel and you can catch recordings. So today, though, is my really all-time favorite. It's all about making memories. I'm going to share ideas today for activities that are real memory makers while you're on the trip. And then I have ideas about ways that you can savor those memories once you come back home. So when you're on the trip, what kind of things can you do that will be real memory makers? I've got 3 categories. The first one's food, no big surprise. The second one is scavenger hunts, and the third one I'm calling shared learning. So let's start with food. I have a client, Muriel, who brings about 12 of her family into a villa in France every summer. They pick a different region each year. And these people are really big cooks. So they have basically a culinary competition. They go out and scour the countryside for all kinds of unusual ingredients. And then they come back and they take turns dazzling each other at dinner every night. This is turned into a really big competition, and it's something that they look forward to every year. So even if your family are not big cooks, or if you're traveling with kids, even young kids, there are food things that you can set up. So an example, when I was traveling with my sons when they were really little, like 8 and 10 years old, every time we were in a location where we'd be someplace for 4 nights in a row, we'd get groceries in the house, and then they would play chef. I'd have a big hat full of numbers, and they would pick 2 numbers out of the hat, and the first number was the night that they were going to be chef, and the second night they were going to be sous chef and cleanup. So this was great because it created this camaraderie between the brothers, and there were different combinations, so they had to work with whoever they were paired with that night. It really made them proud, and they learned a whole new skill, and coincidentally I got a little time off from kitchen duty, so it was really a win all the way around. So as they've gotten older, we have taken this to a whole new level, and now we have what we call a Chopped competition. Okay, this is Chopped 2016 you see going on. We have 16 ingredients, 2 teams randomly selected, 15 minutes to plate an appetizer.
Hey! That's sabotage. That's minus points. That's minus. You don't see us touching that stuff.
5,
Done.
4, 3, 2, 1, and step back!
Well done. Well done. Make sure everything's turned off.
So they get in random teams again, because of course, you know, some relationships in the family are naturally going to be stronger than others. So it's really good that they're randomly matched and that nobody feels left out. So they go in these random teams, and I've already gone and gotten all kinds of groceries, and I lay them out, these ingredients on the counter, and there's always some, you know, easy to incorporate ingredients like fresh spinach, flour tortillas, maybe a special cheese, mushrooms, these kind of things. Then there's also always a protein, maybe some pre-cooked grilled chicken, maybe some raw shrimp. And then after that, there's always a few surprise items, like a full coconut or ginger root. So these are the challenges. Okay, so the ingredients are all laid out on the counter, and the teams alternate picking ingredients till they each have their own arsenal of ingredients. And then they have 30 seconds to huddle to make a plan, and then the clock starts, and they have 15 minutes to plate an appetizer. Now, I thought this was a riot. I had dinner plans already. I'd highly recommend that because you really don't want everyone's appetites weighing on the success of a Chopped competition. But they did an amazing job. We ended up with Asian rim tacos 2 ways. So everyone in my family is already looking forward to our next Chopped competition. And then there's always group cooking with a teacher. So this is a little bit easier because someone else does all the organizing and provisioning and teaching of the group. But it's really fun. Here's a whole group of, there's 3 families that I sent to Cinque Terre, and they're in this country house there. And it was the resident cook, the resident chef there at the villa, who is teaching them all to make pasta. What a great afternoon. Okay, so those were some food experiences that you could do with your family group. So now let's talk about scavenger hunts. Scavenger hunts come in all shapes and sizes, and they're really about learning about the destination while you team build. So they're fantastic activities. Sometimes a town will organize its own scavenger hunt, like this one up on Monhegan Island, up in Maine. So we had to run around, get your photo taken with the seagull, find out the middle name of the youngest resident on the island, asking people, right? So you can imagine that you could even create your own scavenger hunt at a destination that you go to. And it's really easy if you pick a theme. Like in Rome, I created a scavenger hunt for all of the gelato shops. Well, the 4 oldest ones, I should say. So I printed up a map and gave everybody a map, and they had to run all over Rome. And when they got to the gelato shop, there were clues as to what flavor of gelato they should get. So that's an activity that every generation likes to play. And then if you want to step it up a notch, there's a company called Watson Adventure. This time your whole family's on the same team and you're competing against other groups that day. And they're more of a thinking scavenger hunt because you're following clues and you're solving riddles. And they always have it placed around a specific like a landmark. Like I did their scavenger hunt around Grand Central Station in New York City. In New York, they also have one that's at the Met Museum. They call that the Dancing Nudes. So this is a really fun team building thing that'll get your family thinking and learning, but also, challenged and having fun together. So my final note on scavenger hunts is this. They are not just for kids. One of the most memorable scavenger hunts that I ever took was a road rally through the Swiss Alps. And they gave us these little roadsters, and we had 2 couples per roadster, and we had all day these villages that we had to find, and you would get there, you had to find the bakery, and you had to find the statue, and it was so much fun. So I encourage you to really let your imagination get going with this one and see what you can come up with for your family. Okay, so we've done food bonding, we've done team building, and now we're going to talk about something I call shared learning. So just like those 3 families in Cinque Terre who got together with their resident chef at their villa and learned how to make pasta, then you can do that with your family, and you can learn how to sail, you can learn how to row. So here is my family up at Crossberry. It's a rowing camp up in Vermont. Now, we only did the 4-day because the whole slogan at the camp is row, eat, sleep, repeat. So you can imagine that not everybody is on board for a lot of that. So even though I loved it, I loved to row, then I made it short so that it was just doable for everybody in the group, and everyone could jump in and have an experience, and then we could move off and do something else. So I set up all kinds of unique experiences, like an immersion program for language, or working on a farm for a week. Unless, of course, you live on a farm all the time, and then it's not so unique. Or maybe like a monastery stay. Some place where you go and you have just a completely different environment, because I'm a firm believer that the more unique you make an experience, the stronger you bond you bring back home with you. You can also get a book and read aloud as a group. And don't worry, if you're driving in a car, that works too. You can get it on audio. So one year I was driving solo home from San Diego all the way back to New Jersey. So I bought that Harry Potter book on tape. Those Harry Potter books are thick. And we listened to that all the way across the country because I remember the closing chapter playing as we're on the Pennsylvania Turnpike circling Philadelphia. So there's one more activity that I wanted to share with you, which is perfect for bonding for families. It's called Timeline Trivia. It's a game that I made it myself, but I think I better save that for another video. So the takeaway here is be creative, be bold, don't be afraid to challenge people in your group, and you're going to be amazed at the memories that you bring back home with you. So now you've made all of these memories and you're back home. How are you going to savor them, remember all of those details a week, a month, a year later? So there are a lot of ways you can come at this solution. One of my girlfriends takes all of her digital photos and puts it in a slideshow and runs it continuously on this Apple monitor that's on her kitchen counter, so she enjoys them every day. Then there are companies that actually take your digital photos and turn them into a hard copy book. Like iPhoto will do that. And then you actually have an item that you can have in your living room or in your bedroom with you. And that's great. But if you want more detail, journaling is the way. So there are some online journaling sites, and some of them actually track your GPS coordinates every day. And a lot of them you can upload photo and video. So they're pretty handy. But I like something that's more tactile, something that actually has some touchstones from the trip. And that is the reason that I always keep a journal. So what I've done is pull a couple of my journals off my shelf so I can actually show you some examples of things that are great to have in your journal. And to start with, I'm going to tell you my favorite journal. This is from Leelanau. It's a leather worker. He's out in the Midwest, and he makes these small little journals. They also have a slightly larger style, but I like them because they're soft, but they're really rugged, and they're kind of waterproof. It's leather, and the pages can be taken out and replaced, so you can use it for trip after trip after trip. It's really super handy. So the first thing I do with my journal is to write a pre-departure entry. And I do that because it's so interesting to look back afterwards after you've had this adventure and you can see how the trip has unfolded for you. I always say, people don't take trips, trips take people. So I love the way to look back and realize what I was expecting and to see then how it really turned out. So I try to even often start with a little hand drawing, nothing fancy. I'm not an artist, so don't feel like you have to be, but a little cover page, a little starter entry. And then, I do all kinds of things. I collect, this is from my trip down to Fez, Morocco, and there's some business cards from restaurants and even a little pottery gallery that I found. And then I kept a map of the Medina there and the route that I walked in the Medina. So that's kind of fun to look back on because, you would never remember that later, right? And then, of course, there's postcards. Sometimes they're really pretty and sometimes, it's just, this was what I called the elusive moose. Have you ever had those trips where you just have in your mind, of course you're going to see a moose, you're in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. But you go for 3 weeks and you never see a moose, and so I had to get my moose as postcard in my journal. There's also funny postcards like the one in Iowa that says, welcome to Iowa. Hope you brought something to do. What does that mean? Okay, so then there's natural products like this Spanish moss that I got from a swamp down in New Orleans, and I love that. And here is from Denali Park. So when you go to the national parks and they have stamps, so I stamped that, and I have that in my journal along with an entry for what we were doing that day. And I, along the trail, had gotten some flowers. We were hiking up in the Chilkoot Trail over into the Yukon. And then, of course, you got to get all the memories. So here I did. I even saved the mosquitoes that were biting us that day. They were pretty big. They don't look as big when they're dried in my journal, but they were big that day. So here's my journal from Vietnam. Sometimes it is nice to kind of pick up a journal while you're traveling because then it's a little more connected to the destination. And this is when I was in Hanoi, and there's this great restaurant called Maison Hanoi. That was great. And I made a list of toilets I have known because the toileting situation in North Vietnam was you just never knew what you were going to get. So that was an interesting entry. And then I made, notes from when I took the train up and I went to Sapa. Sapa's in the north part of the country. It's all of those rice terraces. And we hiked to these rice terraces where these Chinese tribes live out there. So it's great to keep things like that in a journal. Oh, okay, so this was in Peru. And by the way, this is how I keep the journal afterwards. So this was in that brown Leelanau journal, but I took it out to replace it, the pages, and use it for another trip. And so you can just put clips on it, or you can bind it if you're really fancy. But that worked really well. So this is when I was in Peru, and we were hiking to Machu Picchu, and they have a ceremony on the last night for the porters. It was a porter ceremony, and it's, you're in this spiritual frame of mind because you're hiking over the pass, and it's really special. So I wrote about the porter ceremony, and then of course I kept my permit from when I actually got onto the Incan Trail. That is interesting there for me. And all kinds of things. I fold it so it comes out. See, it's like this. So I fold it so it can kind of unfold, and that's the whole trail that we hiked. So you can see there's a lot of memories in here. Okay, so you can imagine that I had my kids keep journals too. I mean, it's super educational. They can take them back to school, use them for show and tell, and it's the way they practice their writing and their spelling, and it really becomes a little bit of a time capsule because you look back on a journal they kept when they were 6 or 7 and then compare it to when they're learning cursive and they're 9 and then compare it to when they're 15. It's really, really little time capsules. So here's one from my son Tom. He was pretty little, and we actually were in Baja, and we swam with these whale sharks, which were gigantic. And then we were on a beach, and he found a shark's tooth, so he has that taped right in there. And then this is my son Rob, who was always kind of funny. He actually drew a map. He says that we're in Wisconsin, and somehow he tied Wisconsin into the rest of the globe, which is funny. But they also, you just never know what they're going to say. So he says it's so hot it can sunburn a horse. That was from Arizona. It's so hot it can sunburn a horse. Sometimes you're surprised by the entries they make. Like here's this one from Doug, and it says, I don't know if you can read that, but it's important. It says, wart from my left hand came off 57 miles west of Colorado. Folks, you can't make this stuff up. This is as real as it gets. So I hope you got a good nugget or two from all that. We're going to tie these up now, but before we go, I want you to know that I really do understand how overwhelming it can be. I mean, you find this great treehouse in Costa Rica and you love it, but then where do you go from there? What else is there to see while you're in the country? How do you make it into a whole trip? And what, after all of the searching and reading that you do, are you missing something? You just don't know. So people end up with more questions than answers. I hear this all the time, and then they get frustrated and they get overwhelmed. So I have been thinking about how I can take all of my experience and get it out there to you. I have 20 plus years of traveling and documenting and videotaping and vetting, and I have gotten all the kinks out of these trips. So I'm wondering how I've been thinking about how I can make that goodness available to you. And I've hatched an idea, and I think you're going to like it. So stay tuned, because this Friday, I have a big announcement. Until then, remember, you only live once, but if you do it right, once is enough.